During the first 300 years or so of Christianity, followers of Christ suffered terrible persecution. They were crucified, they were wrapped in straw and burned to death, decapitated, torn apart by starving lions in the Colosseum, scourged, and stoned to death. When these methods failed to destroy the Christianity, Roman magistrates developed the art of slow torture to break down the resistance of the Christians. But in all of these trials, the outstanding mark of Christians was their love. They not only loved Christ more than their own bodies and life itself, they also loved the ultimate human enemy, the persecutor, who inflicted torture and martyrdom. This is what Jesus taught them, both in his words and in his actions, especially in his death, when he begged his Father to forgive those who were killing him. Saint Therese of Lisieux tells us that it is by loving our friends and those around us that we prepare ourselves to love our enemies. There's an old story that's told of a woman who bumped into a stranger. "Excuse me," she apologized. She said, "I wasn't watching where I was going." She was very polite and very kind. That evening, while she was doing dishes, her young son stood beside her. She turned and she nearly knocked him over. "Move out of the way," she said harshly, and with a frown on her face. His tender heart was pierced with pain as he got out of her way. Later, when she sat down to rest, she remembered her courtesy to a stranger that day in contrast to her harshness to her own little boy. Feeling remorse, she went to his room, knelt by his bedside, and said, "I'm sorry for the way I spoke to you today." He threw his arms around her neck and he whispered, "Oh, Mom, that's okay. I love you." And then he reached over to the bedside for a little bunch of flowers that he had picked. He said, "Here, these are for you. I picked them because they're pretty, just like you." She began to cry from mixed emotions of shame and happiness. She kissed him and hugged him. Jesus wants us to love our enemies, but first we must begin by truly loving our family and our friends. Forgetfulness, pettiness, selfishness, bitterness, withdrawal, anger, frustration, apathy, laziness, all of these wage constant war against really loving even those we are closest to. Brother Giles, the companion and disciple of St. Francis of Assisi, once said, "It's a great grace to live at peace with those around you." Whoever manages to live in peace and love with others only does so by constant prayer and work. There's an old Peanuts cartoon in which Charlie Brown says, "All it would take to make me happy is to have someone say he likes me." Lucy replies, "Are you sure?" He says, "Of course I'm sure." She continues, "You mean you'd be happy if someone merely said he or she likes you? Do you mean to tell me that someone has the power to make you happy just by doing such a simple thing?" Charlie Brown nods his head. "Yes, that's what I meant." Lucy thinks out loud, "Well, I don't think that's asking too much, I really don't. But you're sure now? All that you want is to have someone say, 'I like you,' and then you'll be happy?" He looks at her and says, "Then I'll be happy." Lucy turns and walks away, saying, "I just can't do it." Lucy couldn't do a simple thing to make poor Charlie Brown happy. But, that leads us to a very important question. What are the simple things that we can do to make those around us happy? And more importantly, are we willing to do them?